This is Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Serving over 84 million passengers and seeing over 850,000 aircraft operations in 2025, it is the busiest airport in the world by number of flights, and the 6th busiest globally measured by passenger volume. About 15 miles southeast of O'Hare is the much smaller but still very important Chicago Midway International Airport. Servicing about 19 million passengers and 210,000 aircraft operations in 2025, not near the numbers of O'Hare, but still very respectable nationwide, being the 38th busiest airport in the United States by aircraft operations. Despite O'Hare being both far larger and far busier than Midway, it's actually the younger of the two airports. O'Hare saw its first commercial passenger flight on October 30th, 1955. But at that time, Midway had been making commercial flights for almost 30 years, with its first being in 1926. This then begs the question of if Midway was already an established airport that had been operating for 29 years at the time of O'Hare's first commercial flight, why didn't it end up being Chicago's premier airport? After all, it is located closer to downtown Chicago, being just 9 miles away as the crow flies. And the Chicago Transit Authority's Orange Line takes just 24 minutes to take you from Midway Airport to downtown Chicago, whereas O'Hare is 15 miles away and Chicago's Blue Line takes 38 minutes to get to downtown Chicago from the airport. What is now Midway Airport was first constructed in 1923 and was originally called Chicago Air Park, but then shortly after renamed to Chicago Municipal Airport after the city leased the airport in 1926. Over the late 1920s and into the 30s and 40s, Chicago Municipal Airport kept growing busier. In the 40s, New York City's LaGuardia Airport was the nation's busiest, but in 1948, Chicago Municipal Airport, soon to be renamed to Midway in 1949, surpassed LaGuardia for the title of nation's busiest, which it held on to until 1960. So throughout the early to mid-20th century, things were going amazing for Midway. It seemed clear to be the dominant airport in Chicago. But then came the jet age. The jet age is defined by a period in aviation history where it became common for aircraft to be powered by jet turbine engines. Jet airliners were bigger, faster, and could fly much further than old piston-powered propliners, making long-distance travel faster and more affordable to the average American. But the issue regarding Midway Airport is that large 4-engine jetliners like the Boeing 707 and Douglas DC-8 needed long runways in order to land and take off, runways longer than Midway Airport had. And there was no easy way that Midway Airport was going to be able to expand. Being located in a dense part of Chicago's southwest side, the airport was and still is surrounded by buildings on all sides, making the airport completely unable to expand. For the airlines, though, it was frustrating not being able to land at Midway. If only Chicago had some other airports with runways long enough to support these bigger planes. What we now know as O'Hare Airport started out as a manufacturing plant for military aircraft during World War II, and was then called Douglas Field Airport. After the war's end, Douglas Company left the airport, and it was renamed to Orchard Douglas Airport, which is where O'Hare gets its IATA code, ORD. The name didn't last long, however, as it was then renamed again to O'Hare in 1949. The airport remained primarily for military and private use during the early 50s, being used extensively by the United States Air Force during the Korean War, as the airport had no scheduled airline service. Throughout the 50s, the need for O'Hare as an active-duty fighter base greatly diminished, and at the same time the airport started hosting regularly scheduled passenger flights in the mid-1950s. And with O'Hare being much larger and with much more room to expand, and being right at the dawn of the jet age, the cards were turning in O'Hare's favor to be Chicago's busier airport. O'Hare's passenger service started out very modest and slow. In 1957, O'Hare had only 36 weekday departures, while Midway had 414. But the city knew that the clock was ticking on Midway's viability as a long-term international hub, so they began investing millions into O'Hare's infrastructure. In O'Hare's early years, transportation to the airport was very annoying, with no direct rail link and no expressways. Passengers seeking to fly in or out of the airport would have to drive on city streets or take a number of streetcars, trains, and buses to reach it. By 1960, O'Hare had its first international terminal and the Kennedy Expressway had opened, linking O'Hare to downtown Chicago. And while good for the airport, this expressway, like all of Chicago's others, did immense damage and destruction to the city, displacing thousands of residents, but this will be a topic for another video. The exodus of airlines from Midway to O'Hare in the early 1960s was rapid. In 1959, Midway still held the title of being the nation's busiest airport, but by 1962, just 3 years later, O'Hare was the busiest airport in the world. In the same 3-year span, Midway lost all but one of its scheduled passenger airlines, Chicago Helicopter Airways. The 1960s were a rough decade for Midway. But later in the decade, the airport saw reconstruction, adding 3 new concourses as well as the opening of the Stevenson Expressway nearby. And in 1967, the airport saw the return of major airlines, mostly being a center for shorter domestic flights. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, O'Hare just kept growing busier. The dominant hubs at O'Hare from United Airlines and American Airlines in the 1980s continue to exist today. And O'Hare Airport is the perfect blend of centrality, size, and connectivity to be a monster for hub-and-spoke flights, which is the main operating philosophy behind airlines like United. What this means is, let's say you want to fly from Bishop International Airport in Flint, Michigan to SFO in San Francisco. There is simply not enough demand for a non-stop flight between a city as small as Flint to San Francisco. But there is more than enough demand to fly from Chicago to San Francisco. So people wishing to make a journey like this, or from any other number of smaller Midwesterns or Northeastern cities, are very likely to lay over at Chicago O'Hare. This is especially true for international flights. Small regional planes will fly from various smaller cities across the region to connect people to their long-haul flights at O'Hare. Today, Midway Airport is mostly dominated by Southwest Airlines, which has quite the opposite philosophy as an airline like United. Instead of hub and spoke, Southwest focuses on point-to-point travel. The airline doesn't have major hubs in the same way that United, Delta, or American do, but they have major operating bases at Dallas Love Field, Denver International, and Chicago Midway, making Midway Airport today an appealing option for those seeking lower-cost domestic flights to or from Chicago. So over the past 60 years, while O'Hare has been expanding rapidly, now being home to 8 runways and 4 terminals, as well as an automated people mover system, Midway has sort of been stuck in time due to its surroundings and its size. Not that Midway has fallen into disrepair or anything, but being stuck in an era before jetliners and non-stop long-haul flights. Midway has been able to gain back some passengers though in the past few decades, mainly due to Southwest Airlines, which accounts for over 90% of the airport's total passengers. When it comes to getting to and from either airport, both are well serviced by public transportation. As I mentioned at the start, both airports are served by Chicago's rapid transit system, the L, with the Blue Line serving the direct center of O'Hare, connecting directly into all of the terminals, which is genuinely one of the best airport connections in the country. Midway Airport's train station on the Orange Line takes you just outside the airport, but it's just a short walk away from the terminals. Both airports also have bus service, with O'Hare having the new Pace Pulse line connecting it with Evanston and other north suburbs. Midway is serviced by many more buses, as the station also serves as a regional transit hub, with many people passing through without ever going into the airport, which is again attributable to how densely populated the area around the airport is. When it comes to driving though, O'Hare is probably the easier of the two to get to, being served directly by I-190, a spur off I-90, as well as 94 and 294. Traffic around the airport can get pretty bad, but it does provide many options for driving access around Chicagoland. Midway can be a little bit more of a pain to get to if you're driving, with your only expressway option being I-55, but even this requires a turn off onto city roads to get into the airport, as it is not directly serviced by any expressways. Chicago isn't too unique for having multiple major airports, especially for American standards. New York City has 3 flagship airports, Washington, D.C. has 2, the greater LA area has 5, and the San Francisco Bay Area has 3. Speaking of San Francisco, I will be making my way out to the Bay Area in August, so there will definitely be some San Francisco content coming soon. And that's it. Thanks to my patrons as always. Consider checking out my Patreon, where I post weekly updates on what I'm working on and early access to videos like this one. It's a great way to support the channel.